Thank you, Abigail. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third and last one of this series, DisQo webinar. My name is Raymond Gemen. I'm a Senior Policy Manager for Health Equity at EPHA, the European Public Health Alliance. The DisQo network, consisting of about 40 organizations from different sectors, recognizes racism and discrimination as fundamental determinants of health. Independent from other health determinants, such as socioeconomic status, racism and discrimination have detrimental impacts both on mental and on physical health, which sadly enough start at a very young age, where children are already confronted with and very aware of discrimination, and is experienced by people all the way to old age, and even goes across generations, where people suffer the consequences from racism and discrimination against their parents and even grandparents. What binds the people in DisQo is a strong sense of injustice and a determination to speak up and take action. And I'm deliberately saying people, not organizations, because it starts with people, individuals who recognize the issue, who want to bring about change within their organizations or within their scope of work. And they might be in different places, either in organizations that are more advanced in tackling the issue and perhaps even have anti-discrimination policies in place, or in organization where it's a complete taboo and very difficult to even initiate such conversations, or where there's a lot of pushback against any changes of structures of power. They might be in different places also in terms of their own power and influence to bring about change. And while some might know very well what needs to be changed, who their allies are, others might still be very alone and in isolation and perhaps not comfortable to have these difficult conversations. Also, people might be at different stages of understanding the issue. Some, including some in the network, they might have been working in this space for many years. They know the topic inside out, the relevant policies, the potential levers for change, the language and terminology, while others, and I include myself to that category, are relatively new. They might not exactly know the historical context or be familiar with the different types of racism, discrimination, and the different impacts that they have. They do not necessarily work directly on the issue, but they do share this sense of injustice and are seeking how to contribute in a meaningful way. And to address the issue in a holistic and cross-sectoral way, we need everyone on board. And a crucial prerequisite for meaningful change is a safe space for dialogue, a space in which it's okay to make mistakes as long as the intentions are good, a space in which we address the content and not the person, and a space in which we can safely ask those uncomfortable questions, because yes, we do need to have these uncomfortable conversations. So I really hope that today's webinar can be such a safe space. Though I recognize that not knowing exactly who's in the virtual space because of the limitations of the technology, it can be a barrier, and it's not the same as being together in the same room. However, at the same time, for some, it might actually take away a barrier when they can ask questions in the chat. So the title of today's webinar is Time for Action. In the previous two webinars, we discussed language and definitions and equality data, respectively. I will share the links in the chat shortly. And today we kind of want to bring the work from DisQo so far together and discuss with you what that action could look like, both at an EU and also at a national/local level. So before moving to the great speakers that we have for you today, I want to quickly mention that we are, as DisQo, in the final stages of developing a joint statement, which summarizes the network common position with key priorities and actions that we have identified should be taken. So this statement will be presented to DG Sante at their Health Policy Platform annual meeting on the 19th of April. It is now final, and we are going to share it now with the network for their endorsements. So if you are interested and you think that your organization might endorse such a statement, please do reach out, and then I will share the joint statement with you. Okay, I'm going to stop it here. Please do drop your questions during the presentations already in the chat. Jacqueline, who I will be introducing to you later, if indeed she manages to join, because she was stuck in a taxi, she was just saying. But in principle, she is going to moderate the Q&A later. If your question is for a specific speaker, do mention it. And then now we are going to move to the first speaker, and I'm extremely delighted to have Michaela Moua with us. Michaela is the European Commission's first anti-racism coordinator. So she leads the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan 2020-2025. So it's great to kind of halfway hear from her how the action plan has progressed so far, what the challenges are, and also what the opportunities are, including for many of us on the call who work in civil society and other organizations who are, who want to get engaged. And Michaela, last week during the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, you said it's not just good enough to be non-racist, we must be anti-racist. So it would be great if you also can elaborate on that a little bit more. As I just mentioned, some of us might not even be familiar or know exactly what it means to be anti-racist. So Michaela, please, let's move to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Just to make sure. Let's start there. Perfect. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here in my role as the EU Anti-Racism Coordinator and talk to you a little bit about the policy side of things and specifically, of course, in my case, the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan. So I've been, as mentioned by Raymond, I've been in my role soon, coming up in May, for 2 years. And just to give you a bit of a background on the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, which is a 5-year action plan spanning from 2020 to 2025, it really kind of came up or was adopted in the backdrop of the events of 2020 and the brutal murder of George Floyd in the US at the hands of law enforcement, which led, of course, to the Black Lives Matter movement becoming a global human rights movement. And the action plan itself, you can go to the next slide, please. The action plan itself is, sorry, the one before. Okay, no. Sorry, yes. So to go back to what Raymond mentioned, indeed, about the difference between being non-racist and anti-racist, I think it's important to define that, since we have an EU anti-racism action plan, specifically having this word anti-racism. And what does that mean? So that we're all, in a sense, at least here in this space, on the same page about what we mean with that. Non-racism, or essentially agreeing with racism and racial discrimination being a bad thing, is the bare minimum. Like, that's where we assume and expect people to be, essentially, to start at. So that is being non-racist. But to actually be anti-racist is to be very deliberately proactive about your position. So it's the active identification and reduction of racism and racial discrimination, which is done by changing and challenging systems, organizations, structures, policies, practices, legislation, and attitudes. And the objective of being anti-racist is true equality. So that is what we mean with anti-racism in the case of the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. As far as the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, it's quite a comprehensive policy tool that covers a range of different policy areas, including employment, digitalization, youth, education, child protection, and health, of course. And also the measures extend to EU external services. And as we know from broad range of studies and data, specifically coming from the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights. We know that racism and racial discrimination still continues to be a big problem, a huge problem in the EU in different areas of life, as you can see from some of these statistics that I have placed in this slide. So this is, in a sense, the backdrop of the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan. Some of the main kind of principles or of the approach of the action plan consist indeed of the horizontal policy approach, a horizontal approach covering the different range of policy area, meaning the aim is really to mainstream anti-racism across different Commission policy areas. The recognition of structural racism is also extremely relevant in the sense that this is the first such equality policy document of the Commission that actually explicitly mentions structural racism, and I'll come back to why this is relevant in the next slide. Furthermore, there's the different forms of racism that are mentioned, from anti-Black racism to anti-Gypsyism, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred, as well as anti-Asian racism, which is relevant because it's crucial to recognize that even though the power structures of how racism functions, in a sense, is the same, but still the manifestations of how racism can kind of show up in real life are different, and recognizing this can lead to more effective policy making. And then, of course, the importance of equality data, which was also mentioned by Raymond as one of the themes that has been part of this series of webinars. So we can go to the next slide then. About structural racism again, the relevance of it, of course, is here again, I'm defining it. So we're again on the same page. I know definitions were part of also this series of webinars, and it's actually language, the language that we use to describe things is extremely important in the area of human rights, fundamental rights, anti-racism, because we tend to sometimes when it comes to uncomfortable things, as mentioned by Raymond, we tend to use proxies rather than actually talk about the difficult thing itself. That's why language really matters in this area, because if we don't talk about the exact thing, we can't fix the exact thing, but we'll fix also a proxy, right? So structural racism here is seen as discriminatory behaviors embedded in society in different areas, but also in political institutions, and really impacting the levers of power in policymaking, and something that really perpetuates the barriers placed in the way of racialized people. And furthermore, something that really impacts, the impacts which can be felt in access to jobs, healthcare, housing, financing, education, and sometimes also in different areas, excuse me, also leading to violence. And here I want to say that it really is important to recognize in a sense the cumulative effects of a structural racism, which also was quite well described by Raymond as something that can affect a person's life over the life cycle. So you can go maybe to the next slide to where I'm a bit trying to, in a sense, in a visual form, to show how indeed the cumulative effects of structural racism and inequalities and discriminatory practices can weaken equality of opportunity and lead to poorer outcomes in different areas of life, showing that it really starts at a young age and can affect the way children and youth from minority racial or ethnic backgrounds can be racialized in education, especially something that really affects Roma communities is segregation in education. But then there's the discrimination that can continue and be seen also in goods and services, or access to employment, or in the labor market, housing, etc. Then there's the different broader societal effects that can be seen from weakening social inclusion and sense of belonging to how racism and discrimination can indeed affect physical and mental health negatively, leading also the fact that can lead to weaker socioeconomic status, which can be debilitating for health, because once you have to save money here and there, you might not necessarily go to expensive checkups, etc. And coming from ethnic pay gap, but also there being this everyday racism still can be a part of a person's life. So this is what I'm trying to show here in the kind of the cumulative effects also of structural racism and inequalities in a person's life cycle. Very good. You can go then to the next slide, please. And then here, of course, another area that we are really focused on is the equality data, collection of equality data, the importance of actually having reliable and comparable equality data to really understand the reality of people suffering from discrimination in the EU. We know that it's actually crucial to making visible this kind of hidden phenomenon of structural racism and structural inequalities and discrimination, to, in a sense, really capturing not only subjective experiences of discrimination and victimization, but also the structural aspects of it. So desegregating data really helps in identifying the specificities of an established problem and helps to uncover, in a sense, the trends and patterns leading to negative outcomes, which structural racism really is. And here, of course, there's quite a broad range of a challenge, in a sense, that it's not really being collected in a way that that is needed to have a full picture, specifically when it comes to desegregated data on race or ethnicity. But the Commission is also working here. We have a subgroup on equality data. We have provided different guidelines, which perhaps you have already discussed here in the last webinar, which I suggest to use to your advantage. And so there are tools out there. Thanks. You can go to the next slide, which if I remember correctly, yes, kind of describes what equality data but you can move on from here. I'm just being conscious of time. The next slide, please. And intersectionality, of course, is a very relevant aspect of the work we do to really use intersectionality as a tool for policymaking to ensure that, we, in a sense, have more effective policy. We have to recognize that people do not typically land on just one social location, but to recognize the different grounds can also actually exacerbate how discrimination manifests is very important also to policymaking. Thank you. You can move forward. As far as how health and health sector is looked at in the ARAP, it's in a sense it falls under the structural, looking at kind of the structural inequities, so structural discrimination, structural racism part of the action plan, recognizing the effects of the pandemic and how it really affected more negatively racialized people and communities. Also, racism is recognized, first of all, as a trauma in the action plan, which is no small feat, and really something that affects people's mental health, but also the need to mainstream anti-racism into the European Commission tools, different tools related to the health sector. Thank you. You can move forward. And then as far as civil society, this is also something I wanted to mention today. And I encourage you all to, we have set up a permanent anti-racism civil society forum in 2021. We had a first call for interest for expression of interest back then, and we will be having a second call for expression of interest this year, either before the summer or right after the summer. We will see. I can inform Raymond on that, so he can pass you the information. But this is really our main tool to have a strengthened dialogue with civil society, and also to have our work be informed by what is actually taking place on the ground. So this is a very, very important tool for us. Furthermore, we are this year, we are working on a kind of midterm progress report on the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, and we will be launching a call for evidence soon, which is a consultation process that will be published on the Have Your Say platform of the Commission, where we also, again, would want feedback on or your insights on the work. So here I can also inform Raymond to give you the information on when this call for evidence will be launched in the upcoming weeks anyway. So I'll stop here. I know I took way too much longer than I should have. Sorry for that. Thank you very much.
No worries at all, Michaela, and thank you very much. So thank you very much for laying out the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, also for pointing towards that forum. I know that, well, we will definitely apply, and we will strongly encourage other network members to also apply and to really kind of bring this intersectoral approach to life, right? So to have maybe the not so usual suspects being part of that forum, but also the likes of organizations working in health or in other sectors, to make it a possibility. Perhaps because part of this action plan are also the national action plans, right? So perhaps in the Q&A, we can come back to that and to hear from you how that is going, so how that EU strategy is being translated to national action. And that actually makes a nice bridge, not to originally the second speaker, with whom we are still trying to get in touch. She is based in Asia at the moment, so connection problems might make it a little bit difficult for her to connect. So we are going to move to Bernice Calmes. I'm really delighted to have you here today. Bernice is the director of Artikel 1 Midden-Nederland, pronounced in Dutch. So Article 1, referring to the Constitution's first article on equal treatment and non-discrimination. So we are going to hear from Bernice how anti-racism action is taken in the Netherlands. So Bernice has a lot of experience working on topics related to inclusion and equal opportunity. And I'm happy to pass the floor to you, Bernice, please.
Thank you very much, Raymond, also for your introduction. It's an honor to be here this morning. As you said, I'm the director at Article 1 Midden-Nederland, and as things are right now, there's so many challenges that we work close together with our partners in the largest 4 cities in the Netherlands, which is Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Utrecht. So some of the practical interventions I'll be discussing this morning are being carried out almost simultaneously in the 4 largest cities in the Netherlands. Well, I only have 10 minutes, but I would gladly invite you all to the Netherlands and spend a week with us to see how it works around here. I'll briefly discuss our organization mandate. There are 18 provincial registries as my own. We are part of a mother organization that manages the main procedures and the contacts with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. I will share some health-related facts and figures that we see in our daily practice. And based on these facts and figures, I will highlight some of our priority action points in 2023 and beyond, which includes data collection. We have we presented last week an almost real-time anti-discrimination dashboard, which we designed with the G4 cities. We also commissioned a blueprint for integrated and multi-dimensional care systems for victims. We provide training for professionals, and we try and keep up a grassroots approach locally to be in touch with potential victims before they have to deal with incidents, so that they have the information they need at hand, just in case they need to make a complaint. Our mandate, the name of my organization, Article 1, there are a couple of organizations in the Netherlands that carry this name, refers to the First Amendment of the Dutch Constitution. As Raymond just said, it's called Grondwet, concerning equal treatment for all. This is the umbrella, and we are an independent organization in the middle of the Netherlands that implement a fundamental rights task on behalf of the 26 municipalities. We are also financed by these 26 municipalities based on a law called Gemeentelijke Antidiscriminatievoorziening. It's a law of 2009. And this law stipulates that municipalities are required to provide information about discrimination and to facilitate a point of registry. This is what we do for these municipalities. It is very important to pinpoint that we register experiences of inclusion, and no formal proof is required when you make this registration. In the Netherlands, it's only a judge that can ultimately determine if there's been a case of discrimination or not. But we find it very important to register experiences of exclusion. Citizens and organizations in our region can contact us for registration of complaints, also anonymously. It can be done by citizens, by counselors, by community workers, by witnesses and other people. We provide information, free legal advice, counseling, mediation services. We assist our municipalities with policy advice, which is sometimes quite complex for small municipalities with very little capacity. And we also facilitate training workshops, and we participate in research programs because we compile a very unique set of data that is not available with other organizations. So this is in short what we do. Maybe interesting to see the forbidden discrimination grounds in the Netherlands. Belgium has another set of discrimination grounds, and I know the colleagues in Austria, in Germany, it's not a harmonized field of work. In the Netherlands, we may register discrimination on the basis of race, age, religion, philosophy of life, sex and sexual orientation, nationality, civil status, handicap or chronically diseases, political affiliation, duration of labor contract, and nature of labor contract. It doesn't mean that the social exclusion is not experienced on other fields, but this is the legal grounds for which we can register. These are some of the health-related facts and figures that we see in our daily practice. Recent research shows that less than 1% of Dutch target groups at risk of exclusion actually register a complaint with the anti-discrimination registry, as myself. In many cases, the exclusion is internalized while people move on with their lives. Prolonged discrimination is something we see in our daily practice, can cause a lot of unrest among certain groups, among others, young people, and it causes radicalization and other forms of stress. We see that community leaders of at-risk groups develop burnouts and chronic illnesses. And we also see cases of intergenerational discrimination that causes illness, identity issues, lack of participation, and social invisibility. I had an assignment to put questions. So this is probably my most important question: how to generate institutional awareness for the at-risk communities. Okay, I'm moving on to our priority action points for 2023 and beyond. The discrimination registries in the 4 largest cities in the Netherlands developed an almost real-time anti-discrimination dashboard to allow for swift action by the municipalities. The way we collect data right now means that we can only report once a year, which is too slow for communities to take action if there are hotspots and things happening in the municipalities. We believe that by increasing the quality of data collection, we can make a stronger case for our at-risk communities. In this tool, we combine at present data from the police, the public prosecutor, our own data, and news feeds. Another very important intervention area for us is the multidimensional cooperation. We designed a blueprint for an integrated and multidimensional care system for victims of discrimination that's being implemented locally. Our main partners are the municipality, the police, and the social workers. And the key elements of the cooperation is first, acceptance that victims' claims are real. This is a large challenge for many organizations. Another point is recognition and registration. And the third one is assistance and counseling. All of this meant to create more resilience in the communities at risk. Another priority action is to keep supporting our professional colleagues based on their specific institutional needs. So we train medical practitioners, social workers, the front office at the police, student bodies where there's been a lot of incidents, and other professionals. One of our most sought after projects right now is the inclusion coaching tools, where we provide personal tools to facilitate a more efficient professional approach. We do not believe that you can completely disconnect the personal from the professional, so they both need tools to facilitate the work. And finally, we have on a project called Article Mid-Netherlands on the Road. And with our majors and local councillors, we join citizens at local markets, libraries, and schools in order to provide information before incidents occur or to register complaints locally. It is meant as a grassroots approach, but being out there in the streets allows us to better tailor our service to victims. It's also an eye-opener for local politicians because they are confronted directly with what happens in their municipalities. You can see us here in our main municipalities, Utrecht, Amersfoort, Doorn, and Nieuwegein, with local councillors or majors. And this is, in short, what we try to do locally to get more attention for this item of discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernice. Thank you for showing what anti-racism, first we heard what it can look like at an EU level, then it's still quite abstract, right? And I think now you have showed what it can mean in real life. When you were just mentioning the tools and trainings for professionals, including medical professionals, for example, last week when we discussed equality data, one of the speakers mentioned the importance of, yes, training the medical professionals, but also training those staff members who actually collect the data, the assistants, maybe the receptionist, and how they can do that in a culturally and ethnic sensitive way. So thank you very much. If I can just ask very quickly, because I see that you provide a lot of free of charge services for people who experience racism, discrimination. If you would need to put a percentage on it, how big is the percentage, do you think, of people who experience this that find you, that actually make use of your support?
Well, as I said, research showed that 1% of people who face discrimination in the Netherlands actually decides to make a complaint at one of the registries. There are 18 of us, but most of the time people just move on.
Tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
Yeah, tip of the iceberg. That's it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Bernice. Okay, so then we are going to move to our next speaker, Jelena Jovanovic, who is the Anti-Racist and Diversity Intergroup Coordinator at the European Parliament. So Jelena has a background in gender studies and has previously worked in research and also at civil society. And last week, she was part of the organization of the Anti-Racism and Diversity Week at the European Parliament. Jelena, please.
Thank you so much. Will I have the slides here soon? Okay, super. Thanks. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation and also for your introduction, Raymond. As you said, I am a coordinator of Anti-Racism and Diversity Intergroup, and I'm really also glad to be here. Personally, you know, you mentioned at the beginning, I was really glad that we are also here as people, people who care, and I also care a lot because I'm personally affected by racism. I experience myself the impact of racism on my mental health, and more specifically, even, you know, like regarding the issues concerning anger management, anxiety, and depression. And that's also why I'm motivated, because, yeah, personal experiences are, I think, the biggest motivation to address this kind of issues and to work on these kind of issues in our institutions and organizations, to commit. That can also affect your mental health and impact and produce, you know, like impact like such as burnout and yeah, I mean, issues are like really numerous. But I am here also because I am coordinating an intergroup in the Parliament that is working on addressing racism and racial discrimination. And I think the main aim of my contribution today is to tell you a little bit more about the work of the intergroup and also to start a discussion about how we can work together to continue cooperation. So I will just start with telling you a little bit about Intergroup. ARDI Intergroup is a informal group of members of the European Parliament who come together to fight specifically racism and racial discrimination. A lot of them are also, well, some of them are also belonging to racialized communities themselves. So they also have this personal motivation and commitment as a driving force. What is important also to know about this group of members of the European Parliament is that they come from different political groups, which also adds the value of having an intergroup on this topic in the Parliament. We do both non-parliamentary and parliamentary work. What that means is, for example, that non-parliamentary work is events and discussions. We try always to have solution-oriented discussions so we can actually come to conclusions that we will use to feed into our parliamentary work, which is strictly policy work. That means more specifically working on the reports with different committees, rapporteurs, shadow rapporteurs, sometimes reports on racial discrimination or input into different reports concerning racism are our own initiative. Most of the time we provide input into draft reports and sometimes also working together with affected communities to propose amendments to draft reports. So this is just one example of what we do in the Parliament. We also do other things, like for instance, proposing topics for hearing in different committee. Like recently we proposed a hearing to the LIBE committee, especially on equality data. Michaela and the previous speakers mentioned the relevance, talked about the relevance of equality data, so I don't have to explain this to you, how important it is to work on that. And then also, I mean, we use other tools that are available to the members of the European Parliament to advocate for different issues. And there are many other tools, but we can also talk about this later on other occasions, but I will just mention one more. So, for example, that can be submitting parliamentary questions to different EU institutions. So we also cooperate with civil society and with through the civil society organizations with affected communities to address their issues towards other institutions. I will also mention some of the priorities. So basically what we do is we work on contribute to development and implementation of laws and strategies, policies on combating racism specifically. Like, for example, we contributed, we work together with the European Commission and civil society to provide input concerning the first EU-wide anti-racism policy, the Anti-Racism Action Plan that Michaela talked about. Then we also work on mainstreaming anti-racism into other fields in the European Parliament, and we work on internal policies. We advance internal Parliament policies to address racism and the lack of racial and ethnic diversity. I don't know if any of you is familiar with the campaign Brussels So White, so we try to continue and implement the ideas surrounding the campaign. And we also work, for example, concerning internal policies. We work specifically on searching for a more sustainable solution to sanctioning and addressing hate speech in plenary sessions of the Parliament specifically. Okay, I forgot how to, yeah. I will tell you just very shortly a bit about our approach and our topics. We work on different topics, so we have a holistic approach, which means that we address issues affecting different racialist communities. So we don't focus on the specific groups, but rather on issues that are relevant for more, if not all, racialized communities. So all forms of racism or dimensions of racism, including, of course, structural and institutional racism. This is also something that previous speakers talked about. We have specific priority topics, but that can always change depending on the current developments, challenges, not only policy developments at the EU level, but of course, challenges that are affecting communities on the ground. We have several principles, but I think I will skip talking about principles. I hope that we will continue conversation and then you will get to know how we work and what is important for us in order to focus, to be more concise and to focus more on our today's topic on the intersection of racism and health. So I think in the Parliament, because now we have a subcommittee, I assume that a lot of your members are familiar with this information. In the Parliament, there is a subcommittee on public health. Perhaps it is interesting for us also to think about ambition of having a real committee in the next mandate, because it is such an important issue, and it is important to have a structure that will in the Parliament that will support the work on public health. So that's why we also need to bring to fill a lot of gaps and to bring to the attention, to bring issues of health equity and equality to the attention of all policy actors, including the members of the European Parliament. The title of this presentation is Time for Action. So I was really thinking about what we can do together to address the issue in the Parliament itself. This is our role. We need to first, how we work usually, it is an example of how we can work together with you as well. So first, I mean, it is very important to lead structured and, as I mentioned, solution-oriented discussion. Raymond mentioned Anti-Racism and Diversity Week. I'm so glad that you took part at our events, and I'm so glad that I am now here and that we start exchanging and we start thinking about how to continue, how to follow up in as concrete way as possible. So I was thinking maybe even we should start discussing how to address specifically the intersection of health and racism in the context of the next Anti-Racism and Diversity Week. This can be, I mean, this might sound like, okay, I mean, you just did it last week, so next year we still have a year ahead, but I mean, of course, we start with preparations much earlier, so I think we should start the discussions already the latest after summer, because we really have to think and to agree and to strategize together what we want to achieve. Every event, every panel discussion, and every workshop that we lead or we contribute to is organized because, you know, there are very specific advocacy goals that come as a follow-up to these discussions. So and that's also where, you know, that is an interesting and a useful process where we can jointly define priorities, because indeed there are so many issues that we should address and so many gaps that we should tackle. So we need to identify main fronts and also main tools that we will use if we want to mainstream the topic. Where exactly, who do we target and how? So I mentioned already subcommittee. I mentioned the reports we are working on. I mean, the tools, some of the tools we are using in the parliament. We can also support your advocacy, as I said, towards the Commission and other, even member states and even specific institutions within the member states, and specific cases of racial discrimination. We need to get members from different political groups on board and inform them with briefings. Think also together how we can get member states, members of the European Parliament support your initiatives. We always talk with affected communities, and we basically do not initiate ourselves anything, but we support the proposals of the civil society. So I think this is very important for you to know. That one of our main principles is like really a principle of meaningful participation and active engagement. So that's how we worked by now, and we hope that we can continue working with you in a holistic manner. And why I think that, and in solidarity, why I think that it is really important to work in solidarity and to use holistic approach. Is well, for example, when I was preparing for this presentation, I had discussions with people from different racialized communities, and I asked them what are the main issues, for example, that they think of when we talk about intersection of racism and health. And I will give you an example of one of my partners and friends who is a visibly Muslim woman wearing a headscarf. She told me, well, you know, what I can think of is definitely problems with access to mental health, because as also previous speakers mentioned, racialized communities are disproportionately affected by poverty, so most of us cannot afford help in that sense. Then we should also think about that's why I'm even curious to learn more about how Ms. Kalmis works in her organization, how they work together, how they work on trainings and education of health professionals. Because also an example of this, a friend who is a visibly Muslim woman, is that when she was talking to her therapist and she was expressing the issues, identity-related issues, and instead of support, she got a question if she is forced to wear a headscarf. And then I realized something similar happened to me as well, because when I wanted to talk about what being Roma means to me and how racism affected how that affected my life in general and how racism impact, what kind of impact I experienced. I got instead of support, I got basically in return perpetuation of stereotypes about Roma. So this definitely, as I mentioned, the issues with anger management, for example, because I mentioned this this example to Raymond, as we noticed together, this really doesn't help our my anger management issues and in general my mental health. So basically, we are often re-victimized during the therapy sessions with our therapist. So this is something related to mental health, but then also, let's not forget about other communities. I had, for example, also a short discussion with partners from Jewish organization, and they told me that, for example, what they would like to talk about more is the fact that the Jewish ritual circumcision, as well as ritual circumcision in Islam, is one of the issues of relevance to debates on public health, and religious freedom rights have been increasingly challenged across member states in recent years. Legislative proposals have been regularly introduced in parliaments across the EU to ban or seriously limit these religious practices. So you see, the issues that we just mentioned during our conversation concern a lot of racialized people, different racialized communities, if not all of us, and that's why we need to work together, and that's why we need to continue using holistic approach. There are also other issues I would like to mention, but because we don't have much time, and I hope that we will continue going deep and that we will go deeper into this discussion. Maybe just to mention that for us, because we work we are interested, as members of the European Parliament are legislators, so for them, it's also interesting to know what are the challenges in terms of laws and policies, and also in terms of addressing the specific cases of racial discrimination. For example, I heard that might be interesting also to mention, and then I will close, the issues with bringing cases to court when it comes to racism in health. In health or racism by health professionals, it is really tricky, and sometimes it can actually prevent organizations taking up the cases. So one of the problems that I wanted to point out is that the doctors, for example, if they are perpetrators of racial discrimination, they're mostly white, and in cases, legally speaking, in cases there is a need for legal expertise. So basically what they told me is, from legal perspective, you have to have medical expertise, and white doctors often cover each other. And I think it's not only about covering each other, but it's also about the lack of knowledge and the bias that a lot of doctors also have. So I mentioned a lot of ad hoc issues, but I hope, in conclusions, it is really time for action, and let's start a discussion, and let's think together how we follow up. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Jelena, for explaining the works of both of the Parliament and of the Intergroup that you are involved in. For the invitation of a potential collaboration next year in the Anti-Racism Week to have a dedication specifically for health, and also for your personal note. So now I have noted your question, by the way, to Bernice about headscarves or veils, so that we can take to the Q&A. Where we are entering now. So the Q&A is kindly moderated by Jacqueline. There you are. Jacqueline, who is the head of policy of Bowman, I should say, the family name, is the head of policy at EASO, so the European Association for the Study of Obesity. I'm happy that you arrived, Jacqueline.
So am I.
Okay, so there are already some questions coming in the Q&A, so please do keep asking them. And I also noted the question from Bernice on her slide about how to generate institutional awareness for the at-risk communities. Please, Jacqueline.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am delighted in so many ways to have made it today. As other speakers have said as well, I am personally invested in all of this, and particularly the intersectionality. Having been, I call myself a Guyanese-born South America Brit, now Belgian due to Brexit. So basically, I think I cover so many of these, and having been in the whole healthcare environment since, or certainly the EU policy environment since 1995. So I'm delighted to actually have so many allies and vested interests around the table this morning. But let's kick off. I'm going to, of course, ask a few questions about other intersectionality because as I think it was Jelena, we'll kick off with you slightly because, you know, last first, you haven't calmed down as yet. You've still got your adrenaline going. So you talked a bit about intersectionalities and your colleagues and friends, partners, friends, you know, trying to get mental health, which of course is historically very, very well known. And of course, I'm representing in my day job a community. So the well, I represent the professionals who work, health professionals who work with and towards people living with obesity. And one of the things that we've seen, of course, is that people with obesity are also disproportionately represented by non-white people and are not getting access to care. So my question is really, to dig a bit deeper, particularly into the policy side, you said that, you know, you can't initiate, but you can support. So the first half of the question is, what are you planning to do in collaboration with the new Sant committee at the European Parliament? Because they're open to ideas. This may be an opportunity for you to go for intersectionality. And then the second element is, what can we do, or what can, because I see lots of national institutions on the call as well, what can they actually be doing? Because unfortunately, in many countries, although race discrimination is protected under the law, let's not go into how it's implemented, but it's protected under the law, but discrimination on the grounds of health status, current, past, or future, isn't necessarily covered at EU level currently, but there's some, if you like, front runner countries like Belgium who are actually looking into this. So over to you, Jelena, and I'm loudly applauding your speech.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I'm not sure I understood the second question, but we will come to that. Yeah. Let's start from the first one. I mean, you rightly noticed FEM committee is super relevant for our work. And we have members of the European Parliament in the ARDI Bureau. This, just to clarify, ARDI Bureau means 8 MEPs who are the most committed to the topic. And then we have around 90 members of the Parliament who are supporting our initiatives. And within ARDI Bureau, we have women members of the European Parliament who are working on intersectionality and who are addressing these issues and who are using this approach in their everyday work. And these MEPs are also involved in FEM committee. They are members or substitute members in FEM committee, and they also work on addressing racism. So we can, for example, think about, when you said we don't initiate it, but we support. I just wanted to say, I think I wasn't clear. We do initiate things in the European Parliament, but we initiate basically an initiative is a support to racialized communities. So that's how we develop initiatives in communication and based on proposals by the communities themselves. But we can initiate start and kick off a very specific initiatives. And for example, when you talk about intersectionality in this context, we can think together now. I have on mind, I have to do a little research about what has happened by now, but we can think about initiating a hearing where more committees can be involved, like for example, FEM and LIBE, and we can you know, develop together concept and focus specifically on the intersection of racism and health.
Excellent.
We just need to have people on board. We need to get politicians on board to support these initiatives. It's really important. And as I said, it was only recently that we have this new subcommittee. And I'll share a little gossip with you also. One of the MAPs that will become part of the bureau soon. I cannot still publicly mention the name, but it is a member of this subcommittee on health as well.
Great.
So
Great.
this is also, you know, like the person who I think would very much be interested in this specific intersection of health and racism and intersectionality as well.
Excellent. Do you know what? I am going to move on to the next person, because if not, Raymond is going to tell me to move on completely.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited to hear that. We'll continue offline. Michaela, I have been following you for so long. I have to say, I'm a fan. But what I wanted to ask today, because I was listening on my way in, it was Walter, who I think is based in Belgium, so I'll be on the call to him a bit later. But he was asking, why is it that we're not going wholesale for elimination of racism, and we're just going for reduction? Michaela.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, that's of course the ultimate aim is the elimination of racism. I think historically, if you look at you know, if you look at the history of racism, I'm not sure if I mean, because still we are talking about people. I think where we can and we do aim to affect with policy, especially with the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, is at least ensuring that structures of society function in a way where people, racialized people and groups have have the possibility to equal opportunities. So this is what we're trying to really, with the action plan, affect. Then there is human beings and their ideologies, for instance, right? I think policy should aim to affect society and its structures and structural and systemic institutional discriminations. But also at the same time, of course, there is the awareness raising where we are trying to actually change people's minds that might have racist ideologies and actually believe that there are different biological human races, which science has already, of course, shown that it's not the case. There's one human race, but that does not mean that racist ideologies do not still affect the realities and the outcomes of people's lives. So I think the ultimate aim is, of course, the elimination of racism and racial discrimination, because these are two different things. There's the ideology of racism, but then there's the legislative racial discrimination of indirect discrimination, direct discrimination, racist harassment, etc., which are two different things. And I think sometimes not recognized as kind of, again, the definitions, right? So of course, essentially we're wanting to eliminate racism altogether in a perfect world. But what maybe the language there is to indeed ensure that in structures of society, at least we can get to a point where everybody has an equal shot of creating the type of life they want.
Exactly. And I think you actually hit the nail on the head. You're not getting off the hot seat just yet. So I think you actually hit the nail on the head because, you know, thinking back, I was speaking with Darius from the Equalities Equinet, and we actually both share a background academically in public international law. And exactly. And I was thinking about it afterwards and thinking, do you know what? When we have laws which are directly applicable at national member states, as is the case with the race discrimination legislative package in general, we tend to end up with what I call lowest common denominator. So actually, in this case, I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head when you say it's about giving a baseline set of sanctions, of aspirations, but at the same time, and we're definitely seeing this in the obesity space as well, because, you know, very clear parallels, complete lack of understanding of the biology of obesity, which actually leads to discriminatory acts, never mind sizes, stigma, and all the rest of it. So we're seeing exactly the same kind of parallel. And so actually on the one side, certainly from my perspective, we're working on what are our legal rights as health professionals, you know, in terms of citizens' rights for people living with obesity. But then on the other side, there's a whole campaign indeed to change hearts and minds. So I absolutely see. But then, you know, my follow-up question before I will have to move on to somebody else, but I could talk with you all day. But my follow-up question to that would be, so the action plan is there until 2025. We go into a new mandate in 2024, which basically means no new business as of probably end of May. So what can we actually be doing to either keep the momentum going and or make sure that anti-discrimination and health, or race and health, come into the mandate letters for the next mandate? What would your advice be?
We, as in us here today, and civil society and different organizations working on health, I think keeping advocating for these issues, the importance of also recognizing health as the health sector as a huge kind of factor in leading to more equal and equitable societies, but also advocating for really understanding how anti-racism links closely and should also be mainstreamed into the area of the health sector, which you all are doing here today and have done with these webinars. Also working closely with, for instance, ARDI on these issues. So I think that the issue is really to push from different angles to break these silos, in a sense, that we are also here discussing today, which I am also trying to do during my mandate, is really to operationalize intersectionality, for instance, not having it be a buzzy, a trendy buzzword, but what does it actually mean within the institution and the work we are doing? When you know that we are quite working in silos in the institution, meaning you have your health DG, for instance, or you have your DG that is working on non-discrimination, but how can we actually bring those two together to really see how they are interconnected and really operationalize intersectionality? So to do it from different sides, I think is the most important thing, and making it visible. Because it's not necessarily something that people are aware of, that discrimination can also be a part of the area of the health sector, as it is in different other areas of employment, education, etc.
Absolutely. And again, I mean, so many questions, but I can see Raymond saying move on.
I want to say you can do
Okay,
one more
on.
question, and I don't know which one you have in mind. There's still the one also from Wouter about data, which could potentially be asked
Yes.
to Bernice.
Yes, exactly. So, Bernice, I had two questions for you. So I'll go with the one with Walter first. And the one from Walter related to data. Let me just find it again because I was so busy listening. Oh, gosh, I've lost it. Raymond, can you help me out,
I
please?
can summarize. Basically, how can we move away from the argument of that the argument is used, we do not have enough data. You know, how can we kind of
Yep.
get out of this analysis paralysis? We need more data, and then not take action. I think, Wouter, I hope I summarized it correctly.
Yep. Bernice.
The way we have organized it here is that the data we collect informs the blueprint for the local cooperation system. So we have called on our municipalities to actually use the data for managing hotspots, but also use the data for the care system or for victims. They will appoint a coordinator that will make sure that the data is collected and that it gets distributed to the partners that need it for the work. So there is not just data collection, but we have established together for which actions we are going to use the data.
Right.
And still, I find that there is too much emotion in the discussion. This is a policy field just like any other that needs to be informed, that needs to be objectified. So we find it very important that you take the emotion a little bit out of the daily conversations, especially because we are also part of the target groups at risk, and help different partners make informed decisions.
Mm. Yeah, if I can pick up on that as my last question. So because it leads on really nicely, Bernice, into a fairly uncomfortable question. So Article 1 is civil society. Why is this not being done by the public administration on the negative question side, positive question side? Can we replicate this in other countries, please? How do what's your recommendation? It's needed.
Well, we officially presented the dashboard last week. So yes, please, by all means, everybody who wants to participate in the pilot stage and who wants to test the dashboard can contact us. We are happy, and our ministry is happy to assist. Why the data is not being used? I think because of the discomfort. I think because we remain human beings on the job, the personal is the professional in the end. So if in the whole of the society, this is unpleasant, it is unpleasant for the public servants that need to write the policy and take the decisions. So that's why we are saying we had this dashboard designed so that we can help people take the emotion out and bring the objective facts and figures in so that we can move on from there. We keep doing research after research after research, and not too far away from here, I have young people that look at me with sort of sad eyes, like this lady is coming here again with a nice story, but our life is such that we do not believe in a world without discrimination. So when I speak to young people, I can no longer go with the story that I'm going to eradicate anything, because they do not believe that.
Yeah.
They believe that racism and discrimination is part of daily life, and they need coping strategies, they need coping tools, they need sometimes survival techniques. They need to build on their own resilience in order to avoid mental ill issues, violence issues, and other levels of disappointments. So that's the situation on the ground here in the big cities. And well, all these efforts our generation is doing now is hopefully for them to live in a more inclusive society. But they do not believe in the story of eradication, and perhaps that's also something we have to come to terms with. We cannot eliminate the discrimination, but we must make life more bearable for the communities affected by it.
Indeed. And I think that that brings us to a really excellent roundup of the Q&A session. To be able to move back to Raymond, I'd like to thank all of you so much for your interventions, as well as candid and willingness to have candid and open discussions on this platform, and making the bridge between your day-to-day race discrimination into healthcare. And I'm really hoping that in the coming times that we in healthcare can match you at that, when we can say, and we've done this, 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 and this. So now I hand back to Raymond and also Irene, if I see coming up on the screen, to see where do we go from here. Right.
Yes, thank you very much, Jacqueline. And Irene, I know that we are running a little bit late, but please do not worry. I can round it up at the end in 30 seconds to 1 minute, so please. So we will hear now from Irene Athanassoudis, who's policy officer at DG Santé. I mentioned it, I think I mentioned it in the beginning, but these thematic networks are actually made possible by DG Santé. So we're very happy to have Irene on the call. So please, over to you.
Thanks, Raymond. Thanks a lot. It was again a very interesting webinar, and I would like to say thank you to every one of the speakers for their good contributions, and also to our audience, as well as to you and to Jacqueline for effective moderation and coordination. For the history of this series of webinars, I would like to say that when in 2020 the Commission was adopting the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, as DG Santé, we have committed that the EU Health Policy Platform will include a specific focus on reducing inequalities based on racial and ethnic origin, and that we will find a way to pass on proposals from civil society to the EU and national level health policy makers. This is what this thematic network today, called DisQo, is about. In parallel, at the same period, from last October until now, the health policy platform has hosted also some other thematic networks. One is navigating health inequalities through artificial intelligence. Another one is about mental health in all policies. And the fourth is about HIV, tuberculosis, hepatitis, and sexual transmitted infections. All these networks integrate the dimension of anti-discrimination. And now on the 19th of April, we will have the annual meeting of the health policy platform, and we are waiting to see the joint statements that they will come out of these different thematic networks, and of course this one. And we hope that we can do a step further and be able to contribute to improve the health and healthcare for these racial or ethnic minority groups. So we will wait for we will wait for the joint statement. As I have said from the beginning, the kickoff meeting, we don't like to see a wishing. I think the message has passed, and I'm happy, but I'm obliged to repeat it. Don't do a wishing list. We, the Commission, has to do this, that. No. take the most pragmatic way. I think that this webinar today really gives the direction very well. Pragmatic approach, describe the actions that have been taken or that can be taken by health stakeholders. If Commission, of course, can help, yes, why not? European Parliament again, also. And all this inspiration and cross-fertilization, your ideas and views presented in this network can bring and support their overall goal. The joint statement is for sure the end, the final output of this thematic network, but in reality it should be, and I'm sure, the starting point for a longer cooperation. As Michaela informed us in the beginning, the Commission is planning to do a progress report of the EU anti-racism action plan, both including and the Member States' action plans and also the Commission efforts. And we have asked to include in the targeted consultations the public health non-governmental organization, as well as other relevant health stakeholders, to give more visibility on the issue and incite them to be involved in the discussions and measures to be taken. Now, regarding mental health, because we have heard a lot about mental health also today, the Commission is preparing a Commission communication on the comprehensive approach to mental health, and is currently undertaking an extensive consultation with Member States, stakeholders, and citizens. A call for evidence has already been completed, resulted in 300 and more responses. And we are done, and we are planning also more targeted consultation with stakeholders to provide input and suggestions. Already action on discrimination was one of the issues raised during the previous consultations, and I encourage you to take this opportunity. This time, the next occasion is on the 21st April, and you are asked to provide posters. I will put the link in the chat. And I would like also to say that there is also another consultation. This information comes last moment, is about the EU for Health program. It's a targeted consultation, again, with key stakeholders, and it's about future priorities. The deadline is also for the 8th May, is quite soon. And the results of this consultation will be presented in a conference on the 9th of June. This is also an online survey, and I will put also the link in the chat. That's all. Thank you very much. And yeah, I hope that we continue to keep contact. And immediately I put the links. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Irene, and likewise, indeed. Thank you very much. I needed to smile a little bit when you said whether the message about the joint statement came across, and I can confirm that it did come across from you, that it should not be a wish list. I can confirm already, like a little spoiler alert, that we have identified various areas where we feel that action is required, and we have very much looked at ourselves. So we have made specific commitments what we as the network can do, and where we see that actions from the Commission would be appreciated. So it's very much a dual thing, to say it like that. Thank you also for the perfect timing. So what is left for me is to thank you, to thank the speakers, to thank the audience for today. Thank you. And I wish you a nice rest of the day, and we will follow up shortly also with the links of the recordings, etc. And I hope to see you at the meeting on the 19th of April, where the joint statement will be presented. Bye.